Okay, just a second.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so let's go. Okay.
Hey, audio. Where is audio?
Is she? You alive? We're waiting for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me welcome everybody. Our moderators, I'm going to moderate together with Comrade Ismabe, who's a member of the International Relations Subcommittee of the ANC and a member of the leadership of the province of Gauteng ANC, and one member of the ANC, Comrade Obed Bapela, a member of the National Executive Committee, and also a long-standing member of the International Relations Subcommittee, as well as our head of organizing, Comrade Nomfola. Comrades, good evening. Your Excellency, Comrade Ambassador Hanan Jara, Alliance Leadership, esteemed panelists, welcome to this Alliance Solidarity with Palestine panel, and a warm welcome to all our participants joining from across the country on Zoom and on Facebook and YouTube and other social media platforms. Solidarity of South Africa and the ANC with oppressed people everywhere has a long history, as expressed by ANC President and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Nkosi Albert Lutuli as early as 1953. And I want to quote Albert Lutuli: "Our interest in freedom is not confined to ourselves only. We are interested in the liberation of all oppressed people in the whole of Africa and in the world as a whole. Our active interest in the extension of freedom to all people denied it makes us ally ourselves with freedom forces in the world, close quote. This principled position found expression as the ANC and PLO in exile over decades cooperated and share experiences of both the oppression that their respective people faced and strategies of resistance. As Nelson Mandela said, I quote, "Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of Palestinians," close quote. At the time of Madiba's words of solidarity in the 1990s, a peaceful solution that will result in two-state coexisting seems like a possibility. However, nearly 3 decades later, we have seen an escalation of the conflict, brutal violation of human rights of Palestinians, and the annexation of land of Palestinians with impunity. Their plans to annex even more land in the West Bank is therefore a further affront to the right to self-determination of the Palestinians. The ANC echoes the words of United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres that this planned annexation of parts of occupied West Bank is the most serious violation of international law and would be devastating for the restart of negotiations and for an eventual two-state solution. Our panel tonight, which consists of well-respected activists of our movement, well-respected commentators in the world, is about adding our voice to the global campaign to stop this travesty. It is more broadly about how, as a country, we can continue to support the struggle of the Palestine people. I will be co-moderating tonight's event with Comrade Peace Mabe, who is a member of parliament, as well as an ANC member of a Provincial Executive Committee of Gauteng, and as I've said, and a member of the International Relations Subcommittee, Comrade Obed Bapela, who's a long-standing member of this committee, a member of the National Executive Committee, as well as Deputy Minister in government of South Africa. And we will start off our proceedings tonight by hearing from a strong global Palestinian voice, Omar Bagoti, who is an independent Palestinian commentator and human rights activist. He is a founding member of the Palestinian Campaign for Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel and the Palestinian Civil Society Boycott, Disinvestment and Sanctions, BDS campaign. And I want to take this opportunity and deliberately, I have not yet introduced our panelists because our moderators will be introducing some of the panelists, but I can tell you amongst our panelists, we have Comrade Lindwes Zulu, we have Comrade Obed Judy, we have Andy Bibi, we have Comrade Nduma Nana, Bongani Masuku, Your Excellency Hanan Jara, and one of our veterans, Comrade Ronnie Castrols. I'm sure the moderators will elaborate more as they allow our panelists to come in. So welcome to this event, and over to you to set the scene for why this solidarity at this moment in the history of Palestinian struggle is so critical. Comrade Omar, over to you.
Thank you very much, dear Excellency, dear comrades in the Alliance and civil society in South Africa. On behalf of the Palestinian BDS National Committee, the broadest coalition in Palestinian society and the leadership of the global boycott, divestment and sanctions movement for Palestinian rights, I thank you for inviting me to this important solidarity panel. The history of the PLO's resolute support for the ANC-led anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa was never forgotten by your great leaders like Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Ahmad Kathrada, Dennis Goldberg, and others. It is this unique partnership in struggle that allows Palestinians today to hold South Africa to a higher standard when we call for effective accountability measures in response to Israel's planned de jure annexation, including lawful and targeted sanctions against the Israeli regime of occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid. As an indigenous people, Palestinians today are deeply inspired by the Black-led uprising against systemic racism and white supremacy in the United States, which is organically connected to the global resistance to the US imperialist role worldwide. Successive US administrations, often with Israel's help, have sponsored or supported not just apartheid South Africa, but dictatorships, far-right regimes, and death squads to maintain the hegemony of multinationals and large banks over many nations in the global South and perpetuate their pillage and exploitation. In this context, the BDS movement stands resolutely with the movement for Black lives. If, quote, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed, as Steve Biko once wrote, then BDS is particularly crucial because of its role in decolonizing Palestinian minds, not just in contributing to the decolonization of Palestinian land. Begun in 2005 by the broadest coalition in Palestinian society, BDS has become the most effective form of international solidarity with our struggle for self-determination and liberation. It calls for ending the 1967 occupation, ending Israel's legalized system of racial domination, which meets the UN definition of apartheid, and the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes of origin in accordance with UN resolutions. The BDS movement is deeply rooted in decades of Palestinian popular nonviolent resistance and is particularly inspired by the South African anti-apartheid movement and the US civil rights movement. Anchored in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, BDS categorically opposes all forms of racism and discrimination, including anti-Semitism. Our movement targets complicity, not identity. As Israel becomes a role model for far-right, xenophobic, or authoritarian leaders across the world, from Trump and Salvini to Orban, and from Bolsonaro and Modi to Mohammed bin Salman, BDS is increasingly being recognized as a significant partner in a growing international progressive wave, fighting for global indigenous, racial, economic, gender, social, and climate justice against the forces of fascism, xenophobia, and savage neoliberalism. Israel and its supporters are desperately attempting to suppress support for Palestinian rights and to ensure impunity for decades of apartheid and colonial oppression. From its brutal siege of Gaza to its land-grabbing construction of illegal settlements and gradual ethnic cleansing, especially in occupied Jerusalem, the Jordan Valley, and the Naqab, Israel has for decades been perpetrating what UN investigators recently concluded were acts that may constitute war crimes or crimes against humanity. This is what the ongoing Palestinian Nakba looks like. Upon visiting the occupied Palestinian territory, the late ANC leader Ahmad Kathrada, who supported our BDS movement, said, quote, "In our short stay here, we have seen and heard enough to conclude that apartheid has been reborn here. In its reborn form, it is, however, worse than its predecessor," end of quote. But we remain hopeful, despite all the pain and loss. BDS has won the support of major international trade union federations, starting with COSATU, the largest farmers' union in India with 16 million members, progressive women's group, academics, students, LGBT activists, and others. The cultural boycott of Israel is growing steadily, with thousands of artists endorsing it. Major corporations like Veolia, Orange, and others have suffered major losses or reputational damage due to BDS campaigning, forcing them to completely abandon their illegal projects in Israel. The city of Dublin in 2018 became the first European capital to endorse BDS. Mainstream churches in South Africa have endorsed BDS, while major churches in the US, including the Presbyterian Church and the United Methodist Church, have divested from their pension funds from complicit companies and banks involved in Israel's occupation. Today, members of the US Congress endorse BDS or defend the right to advocate for BDS and call for leveraging US aid to Israel to hold it accountable to international law. Tens of cities, cultural institutions, and public spaces in Spain, Italy, Belgium, Norway, Ireland, and elsewhere have declared themselves apartheid-free zones, calling for a military embargo on Israel or excluding from public tenders corporations that are involved in Israel's human rights violations. In South Africa, we rely on the great work of our partners in the South African BDS coalition, in COSATU, in trade unions, the Communist Party, ANC, and in civil society to pressure government to translate its consistent political positions in support of Palestinian rights into concrete and strategic measures that can significantly aid our liberation struggle. Specifically, and I'm coming to the end, Palestinians are calling on South Africa to help end Israeli apartheid and colonial rule by, 1, excluding from public contracts and investments all companies recently listed in the UN database of businesses involved in Israel's illegal settlement enterprise, as well as other companies that are proven to be complicit but have yet to be included on the list, including HP, Caterpillar, G4S, Heidelberg Cement, CAF, Hyundai Heavy Industries, among others. 2, declaring a symbolic yet morally consequential military embargo on Israel. 3, holding South Africans who have enlisted in the Israeli occupation army accountable to legal prosecution for involvement in war crimes in accordance with South African law. 4, implementing the decision of the 2006 Non-Aligned Movement Durban Conference to ban all products of Israeli companies operating in the occupied territories and ban entry of Israeli settlers into South Africa. 5, and last, ensuring that Israeli political, military, and security leaders, as well as international and Israeli banks and corporations responsible for war crimes, are brought to justice. Walking past the grand statue of Nelson Mandela in Ramallah the other day, I saw young Palestinian kids standing solemnly underneath the statue and saluting it. Mandela's inspiring legacy lives on, rekindling our hope for freedom, justice, and equality. Palestinians look evil in the eye every day. We speak truth to power every day. Like our South African sisters and brothers, centuries of resisting colonialism have taught us to steadfast, to resist, and to insist on nothing less than our full menu of rights, as Archbishop Desmond Tutu once said. We count on you to help us bring to an end Israeli apartheid and to bring forth our South Africa moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Omar, for giving us this important context to why we are having this important event tonight. The ANC, in all its international resolutions, have always reflected on its position in solidarity with Palestine since 1994. It has been an important part of our foreign policy as a country, and South Africa has always closely watched and engaged on developments in the struggle for Palestinian self-determination. Moreover, as a member of the OAU and African Union, Democratic South Africa actively advanced the African position in support of Palestine, expressed in numerous resolutions of the OAU. Yesterday, on the 24th June 2020, during the UN Security Council teleconference on the question of Palestine, Deputy Minister Alvin Boertes reiterated this position of South Africa when he said, I quote, "Allow me to reiterate that South Africa will continue to support all efforts aimed at the establishment of a viable, contiguous Palestinian state existing side by side with Israel within internationally recognized borders based on those of 4th June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, in line with relevant UN resolutions, international laws, and internationally agreed parameters, close quote. Our next speaker is Comrade Lindiwe Zulu. Comrade Lindiwe Zulu, she's the chairperson of the ANC International Relations Subcommittee. She's the member of the National Executive, and she is the Minister for Social Development. Over to you, Comrade Zulu.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mabe. The SG, I salute you all, comrades of the African National Congress, in particular the SG, all members of the National Executive Committee who are present here today, and members of the National Working Committee. I also would like to thank the previous speaker, Comrade Omar, and thank you very much for your continued support and your unwavering support in the struggle for the emancipation of the people of Palestine. To all the human rights activists who are participating here today, in particular the veterans of our own struggle, who have extended themselves beyond just the liberation struggle of South Africa, but have consistently committed themselves to the struggle for the Palestinian people, those who are here with us today. I wish to thank you, Comrade SG and the office and the DSG for arranging this solidarity meeting, and also to make the continued call by the African National Congress that we have to be consistent, we have to be resolute, we have to stay on course in as far as the struggle is concerned. And as we were also supported ourselves in our own liberation struggle by the very same Palestinian people, it is our turn, it is our time to remain on course. In pursuing our international relations and cooperation objective as the African National Congress, we are informed by the Freedom Charter, which was adopted on the 26th of June in 1955, wherein it stated, and still is relevant even today, I quote, "There shall be peace and friendship." This principle is founded on the African claims as adopted in 1943, and all our National Conference resolutions, which are predicated on international solidarity as a pillar of the national democratic revolution. We have consistently taken resolutions, and we have a track record that indicates our solidarity with the Palestinian people. Our view of the world is based on the founding principles of the Freedom Charter, namely a world in which there is respect for the right of national sovereignty of all nations and the pursuit of world peace and friendship, and not wars. As the ANC, our strategic objective is to ensure that we build a better Africa and a world that is free from shackles of underdevelopment and the legacy of colonialism. And as such, we'll continue to advance our progressive internationalism and solidarity around the world. And so to that effect, establishing and sustaining friendship, working towards peace and stability in the continent and the world, and improving economic relations is paramount. More paramount now, especially as we are facing the most difficult time of the spread of COVID-19 and the challenges that come thereof. So solidarity and campaigns for the African National Congress will continue to play a critical role in the continent and the global progressive movement. This is the cornerstone of the founding values of the National Democratic Revolution. And as such, will continue to galvanize and sustain solidarity relations with oppressed people in the continent and internationally. In 1990, our stalwart and former ANC President, Comrade Oliver Tambo, reminded us that, and I quote, "The fight for freedom must go on until it is won, until our country is free and happy and peaceful as part of the community of men, and we cannot rest." this also has to be extended to the struggle that the Palestinian people are facing. For this reason, the ANC will continue to regard its international relations and cooperation work as a key platform to advance and create a better world for all. And as far as the Palestinian struggle is concerned, our continued and unwavering support with the oppressed people of Palestine. You will recall that successive ANC national conferences have taken resolutions and action in support of the Palestinian people, with the most recent being our 54th National Conference, which resolved that, and I quote, in order to give practical expression of our support to the oppressed people of Palestine, the ANC unanimously resolved to direct the South African downgrade of the South African embassy in Israel to a liaison office, and this is what is happening. Consistent with this resolution, and as part of our demonstration of protest against continuous killing of the Palestinians by the Israel security forces, the ANC-led government took a decision to recall our ambassador to Israel in May 2018. We affirm our position that we do not recognize Israel's sovereignty over the territories they occupied from June 1967, including the Golden Heights. We do not consider them to be part of the state of Israel in line with international law and relevant UN resolutions, particularly Resolution 242 and 497. Therefore, with further call on the international community and the progressive world to strengthen its mobilization and support of the peoples of Palestine. The threats and pronouncements of annexation is an illegal act in international law, as already been expressed by my comrade Mabe. It is unacceptable unilateral act of seizing land from a state and a flagrant violation of international law, a disregard for international humanitarian law, the United Nations Charter, and the Rome Statute. Therefore, we oppose this in the strongest terms, and all the ANC will continue to mobilize South Africans, the SADC region through the liberation movements, progressive forces in the continent and the world to condemn the annexation of Jordan by Israel, backed by the USA administration. We call on the African continent also to work with us as we continue with this liberation struggle. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Comrade Lindiwe. The SG has done the welcome and has acknowledged all the participants. I won't be doing that for the sake of time. Thank you, Sis Lindiwe, for reminding us of our numerous resolutions and actions that our liberation movement and government have taken in support of the struggle of the Palestinian people. I will now call upon Comrade Franz Baleni, who is the South African Communist Party Secretary of the International Relations and a former General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers and the current chairman of Petro SA. Comrade Franz, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Comrade Mabe. Good afternoon to the leadership of the African National Congress, COSATU, SACP, the NGOs, veterans, and fellow panelists. The South African Communist Party unwaveringly stands with the people of Palestine in their struggle for fundamental right to self-determination. The SACP fully supports the intensification of the just cause to end the apartheid Israel occupation of Palestinian land. Our next step is to upgrade our program of action, focusing on strengthening international solidarity, democratic and peaceful activities in support of the oppressed people of Palestine. In the same way, the SACP calls upon the African Union to demonstrate and express active solidarity with the oppressed people of Palestine by adopting and implementing a program of action to support their just struggle for democratic national sovereignty. The program should include the objectives of global boycott, sanctions against the apartheid regime of Israel as a starting point, and imports of Israel products produced from the occupied Palestinian territories should be completely prohibited in our continent. As a sign of continental unity, a clear message of solidarity with the oppressed and expropriated people of Palestine. We know better as South African
Comrade Franz Berlin is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
We can hear you. Okay.
Oh, okay.
We can proceed, Comrade Baleni.
Okay. So we fully support the solidarity campaign to an extent that over the decades, people of Palestine have been oppressed. It is time for them to be free. We know better the pain we've gone through to be where we are today in 1994 and starting to enjoy our freedom. The SACP fully supports this campaign against the annexation of land of people of Palestine. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Franz Berleni, for the message and the statement that is very clear on behalf of the South African Communist Party. Our next speaker is a member of the Global Boycott, Sanctions, Disinvest Campaign, BDS for short. Comrade Judy Favish is an activist and leader of the BDS South Africa Committee, and will be in her input tell us about the BDS, the work it does, and its current campaign to stop the annexation. Comrade Julie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Obed, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this very important meeting today of the Alliance. So I want to start by recognizing and affirming that South Africa has had a long history of solidarity with Palestine, but that solidarity has largely been structured on the local basis. And towards the end of last year, in order to address some of the weaknesses associated with the local-based approach, the international Palestinian BDS movement entered into discussions with some of the comrades who have been involved in solidarity work in South Africa, with a view to launching a coalition comprising largely Palestinian solidarity organizations, but in alliance with civil society organizations. And to that end, a conference was organized in February this year, which was attended by about 11 Palestinian solidarity organizations, but who had also consulted with members of civil society, key organizations such as the union movement. And at the end of that meeting, an interim committee was elected, and a set of key principles which would underpin the way in which the coalition would approach the task of organizing campaigns in support of the Palestinian struggle were adopted. This interim committee is now the officially recognized structure for communicating with the international solidarity movement. The strategic vision of the coalition is to fight for a just peace, democracy, equality, and safety for all those who live in historic Palestine. Naturally, we support the three key priorities of the BDS movement internationally, which, as Comrade Omar articulated, include ending the Israeli occupation and dismantling the wall, full equality for Arab Palestinian citizens, and recognizing and respecting the rights of return. We had hoped to launch the coalition formally in July this year, but due to the COVID pandemic, that has proved difficult. We have organized a number of solidarity activities already, including an international webinar to commemorate the International Nakba Day. But our key campaign is really focused on ending or preventing and stopping the impending annexations. So we believe that we're at a critical juncture in the Palestinian struggle. On the one hand, we have an increasingly oppressive Israeli state, bolstered very powerfully by the American government, as evidenced by the so-called deal of the century. And of course, the imminent debate on annexation, scheduled for the 1st of July in the Knesset. And on the other hand, we are seeing increasing levels of mobilization across the world around racism in the United States and elsewhere, including in South Africa, as well as some of the key challenges which have surfaced through the pandemic, which have really highlighted unacceptably high levels of inequality and poverty across the world. But sadly, the silence about racism perpetrated against Palestinian citizens continues. Now, 50 Palestinian civil society organizations are challenging the world to end this silence. They have stated that how nations respond to the impending annexations constitutes, and this is a key point, and I quote, a litmus test for the international community, and I unquote, to demonstrate solidarity, not through rhetoric, but through concrete action. The International Palestinian BDS movement has called on the South African BDS coalition to take the lead in a global campaign to halt the annexations and other egregious violations of international law and human rights. So in crafting our response as a solidarity movement, we were very mindful of the need to respond to the demands that had been put forward by organizations and civil society in Palestine themselves. Hence, the global statement that we compiled and released for endorsement in South Africa is grounded in the call which was drafted by the civil society organizations of Parliament. And in essence, the global statement, the Global South statement, is calling on government in the Global South, and in our case, our own government, obviously, to use its power as the chair of the African Union, as well as its seat on the Security Council, to implement, as Comrade Omar said, some concrete and strategic measures in order to demonstrate their support for the Palestinian struggle. These have been mentioned before, but I think it's worth reiterating because these are the forms of action that the international solidarity movement is hoping that the South African government will lead internationally. So the first relates to, within the United Nations, adopting a resolution providing for targeted sanctions on Israel, including a boycott of all products emanating from the illegal settlements, suspension of trade agreements with Israel, and a military embargo. All measures that are similar to those that were adopted by the United Nations Special Committee on Apartheid, and which, as we know, played a key role in advancing our own struggle against apartheid. Secondly, to promote the idea of a establishment of a UN Special Committee on Apartheid to address Israeli policies over indigenous people in Palestine. To guarantee the effectiveness and, very importantly, the regular updating of the United Nations database of companies involved in business with Israel's illegal settlement enterprise. And lastly, supporting the International Criminal Court's probe into Israel's war crimes and crimes against humanity perpetrated in the occupied Palestinian territory as well as in Israel itself. To this end, so far, we have managed to get almost 300 signatures from eminent and prominent people across our society. These include former President Kgalema Motlanthe, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, religious leaders, former and current university vice chancellors, former cabinet ministers, veterans of the liberation struggle, retired military generals, former commander of the Defense Force, senior academics, social activists, human rights defenders, unionists, community leaders, members of the business community, arts and culture activities, and ex-political prisoners and trade unionists. I'm not going to list all the names of, I'm not going to list any names, but we can certainly make available a list of full endorsements to members of the Alliance. We're very pleased that the South African Communist Party has officially endorsed our statement. We will be continuing to collect more signatures, and our next key step in our campaign is, together with members of the Solidarity Movement in Asia and Latin America, is to organize a mass rally, again using that rally to demonstrate support to our governments of the extent to which there is support within our societies for governments to take decisive action to illustrate their support for the Palestinian struggle. I'll conclude now by saying that we hope that our government will rise to the challenge posed by the international solidarity movement of leading this campaign and to implement the concrete and strategic interventions which have been asked for in support of the Palestinian people for their freedom from racism, colonialism, and apartheid. Given our history, the world expects this of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Judy. And the demands as articulated by the BDS are loud and clear. And I think we've all heard: boycott all products emanating from the occupied territories in Palestine, to call for the UN Special Committee, similar to the one that UN had on apartheid South Africa, be established. Thirdly, to pursue the International Criminal Court for Israel to be investigated and those who are involved in atrocities be prosecuted. Loud and clear, and this points to the important role that civil society continues to play in helping to influence and shape the policies of governments. And I think the issue of the agonization of the land reminds us of the 1913 Land Act in South Africa, when the former Secretary General of the ANC, founding Secretary General, Pixley Gaseme, said, we wake up one Friday morning and we found ourselves as pariahs in our own land, meaning we are outcast. And I think the agonization that is about to begin in Palestine is similar to that. Our next speaker is a tireless campaigner for freedom and social justice, working in grassroots communities in Lenasia, a strong voice in civil society, in the call of Islam, and in the women's movement, and a leader in the Palestinian solidarity movement. Auntie Bibi, as she is affectionately known, the floor is yours, Auntie Bibi Khan. Thank you.
Greetings of peace to all. I'm very uncomfortable, but yes, salam. What does one have to say? Because so much has already been said. And thank you very much, Judy, for that input, because it's just all there. Everything that you've said is what we need to do as civil society. But maybe for my small little voice is just to talk about the language that needs to be ratified for and by Palestinians with regard to not the question of the annexure, but the question of the stolen land. It's blatant stealing that has taken place that needs to be addressed, because this is theft on a grand scale. We talk about the US and Israel as being very straight and honorable people, but history contradicts this, really contradicts this. The prejudicial attitude needs a major paradigm shift in society in relation to the ongoing, I mean, how long has it been? It's years and years that it's been ongoing for us to live in peace and harmony in a world. But the US and the Israel, I mean, really, can they be called honorable in any way? Their arrogance, the superiority in the racism of their language. And that's why it's not about the letter before the name that gives anyone the license to speak. Every one of us have a license to speak. And that's where we are about making sure that women's voices are raised. And we speak out against the dominance and the oppression in relation to the Zionists. Their campaign and the withdrawal of the investments. I'm grateful Umar Bugoti brought it up, because that's the complicit behavior in South African companies as well. I mean, thank goodness G4S, but they're still operating here. So it's all about the investments that must be withdrawn. And there's many noble persons, ordinary people that want to have their names associated. So yes, Judy, we will be helping with the grassroots campaign to ensure people to sign up and be part of that campaign. But we need to stop this show of dominance when it breaks the democracy based on trade. We can't have the continuation in breeding enslavement. That's what it is. They are breeding enslavement, because what is the conditions that the Palestinians live in? Is it not possible that we have to ensure our understanding of justice? What is the understanding of justice? Justice must not just be seen to be done, it must be done. For justice must be truth in actions. If we don't have truth in action, then what are we talking about? It's all just names and words that we use. There's no real truth in relation to justice. There is a Gaza docket that was put before our NPA. Nothing was done because of the whole question of how do you deal with the dual citizenship? And therefore, justice wasn't done. So the Gaza docket was that. But we are not really sure if people have a freedom of choice in our country. They make choices, you know. But do the people in Palestine have a choice in relation to their quality of life? Women are in peace structures. We engage with women in Palestine. I refuse to call it Israel. It's women in Palestine that we are engaging with, that are standing and doing things as it was done by the Black Sash here in South Africa. Because women serve in peace structures, in the structures that I work with, in civil society. So let the freedom of the Palestinians sit within our consciousness, so that we are assured to be working for peace building. Otherwise, our prejudicial attitudes is just about, it's there, you know, we talk about it, we talk about Black Lives Matter and things, but there isn't really been a paradigm shift. The arrogance that comes around with racism, the superiority that comes around with racism needs to stop. So I trust that has been worth it. Thank you very much to all, and thank you, Comrade Nomvula, for being here, because now I felt a little bit more at ease to speak. Thank you so much. Hello.
Thank you, Auntie Bibi. Thank you very much. Nice to hear your strong voice. Nice to hear our mothers, our leaders, our veterans. Thank you very much. The struggle you have waged during your days and now. So our next speaker was just a teenager when he visited Palestine as part of a solidarity event which was organized in protest against the actions of Israel government. And this member, who is now a member of the National Executive Committee, is Comrade Mduma Nana. And here, Mduma Nana is here to tell us about his experience during those years as a teenager when he went to be part of an event organized in protest against actions of Israel government. Comrade Ndu, the floor is yours.
Comrade SG, unfortunately, Comrade Ndu is struggling to connect, so I'd suggest that we skip him and go to the next speaker. He is still trying to make a plan.
Let him connect, but let's go to the next speaker, Comrade Mabe.
Thank you very much, Comrade SG. We will now call Comrade Bongani Masuku, who is no stranger to international solidarity. He will be speaking on behalf of the Trade Union Federation, COSATU. Comrade Bongani Masuku, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Comrade Secretary General, Comrade Mabe, the Chair, Alliance leaders, activists, stalwarts of the International Solidarity Movement, International Relations Chair and former Chair, esteemed stalwarts, and ambassador amongst us. We are particularly inspired, Comrade, to have amongst us Auntie Bibi and Omar Baguti. It's almost been 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, Comrade Omar, when we were together in a very controversial circumstance. But I'm happy to see you, and COSATU is happy to see you in strength as you demonstrate. COSATU extends special greetings to all liberation forces and progressive forces and the working class movement generally at this important event convened by the ANC and the Alliance. And congratulations to all solidarity activists for having taken the brave stand to choose to be on the side of justice when it matters the most. On behalf of the national office bearers of COSATU and the CEC, we want to indicate that this journey is not a destiny. We have and still continue not to waver on our principle regarding the Palestinian people's struggle. The struggle for the Palestinian people is the struggle for all of us. It is ours. It's a struggle for all who suffered and still suffer the same brutality of racism. Racism in the United States and racism in Israel and racism in Africa has not different effects, it's the same. It is not possible to have freedom for some and imprisonment, occupation for others. There are countries that have particularly positioned themselves as the manufacturers and the factories that produce and reproduce racism, particularly the United States and Israel. They reproduce imperialist racism and the domination of humanity in every sphere of the world. And we must be clear, comrade, that there is a direct relationship between racism and poverty. Poverty, class, gender are inseparable. There is a relationship, one feeds the other. So it must be very clear that waging one struggle is simultaneously expanding the frontiers of justice and dignity in every other sphere. COSATU is proud to be a founder member of the BDS movement and other solidarity movement that have been in the front line of the struggle against the oppression of the Palestinian people, occupation and colonialism wherever it manifests. Workers who throughout all these ages have been the anchors of the global justice movement against apartheid and colonialism have stood resolutely at the risk sometimes to their own lives and their own livelihoods. COSATU recognizes the inseparability and indivisibility of freedom, of rights and dignity. COSATU unions have sent delegations to Palestine and offered practical solidarity. We pay special tribute in particular to the former Deputy President of SAMU, Comrade Boss, who was treated so inhumanely by the Israeli military as he was leading a COSATU delegation to the occupied territories, and all other stalwarts and activists who have been to the front line in the Palestinian land. We are proud, comrade, that together as the Alliance, the ANC, SACP, and COSATU, we formed what used to be called, Comrade Ronnie Kasrits will recall, what was called the End the Occupation Movement. And we moved on also to be founders of the Coalition for a Free Palestine and BDS and all other movements that we participated in. In this way, we are proud of the little contribution, no matter how big the odds and the scales against us. The way forward, comrade, in summary, given the time limits that we have, is that it has been well said and well articulated. The intensification of BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, including academic boycott. We call on universities to play a more bigger role in changing the narrative about Israel and the history of the Middle East in general, particularly the media bias. In the media, we are told less about the experiences of the Cuban, the Venezuelan, the Palestinian people. We are told more about the biddings by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. It is important that activists use the pen to transform and change history and to be able to empower the Palestinian activists who daily are in the trenches of the struggle that is invisible. We also support government initiative and the strength and call on to strengthen the multilateral institution intervention, practical intervention, particularly against the recent annexation that has intensified the colonization of the Palestinian people from the Jordan valleys all the way up to where the land of the Palestinian people ends. Lastly, Chairperson, we want to call on the strengthening of an Africa solidarity movement that will be able to highlight and stand strongly against racism wherever it manifests itself. Because racism is not unique to any particular country, it's a global virus. It is reproduced and produced by those who benefit from the institutions of superiority, of domination, of imperialism, of patriarchy, and of sexism. It is important that we link the universality of these structures, that there's no one structure that waits for the other. They proceed simultaneously. In our theory of the national democratic revolution, we say the interrelation of the contradictions is such that none waits for the other. As we fight sexism and patriarchy, we fight racism. As we fight racism, we fight class oppression simultaneously. These are the structures that workers and people of the world are involved in. And we stand to be counted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Bongani, for that revolutionary message of solidarity from COSATU. Our next panelist needs no introduction. The Ambassador of Palestine to South Africa, Her Excellency Hanan Jarar, who at the age of 14 experienced the first Intifada, and since then have been a tireless fighter for the freedom and self-determination of her people, including working in Palestinian National Authority. Your Excellency, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Comrade Pace. Thank you, dear comrades. Firstly, I thank you on behalf of the Palestinian people for giving us the chance to be here with you. And I would like you to thank you for this event organized by the ANC-led Alliance in solidarity with Palestine. Palestine and South Africa have a shared experience in fighting racist policies and brutality by other nations The PLO and the ANC has a relationship rooted in the fight against apartheid South Africa. It is shameful to the human race that in the 21st century, we are still experiencing such racist behavior at this level. Since 1948, Palestinians have been subjected to violence and racism in Israel's quest to take the land. The ethnic cleansing campaigns never stopped. They continue daily and systematically by demolishing Palestinian houses, grabbing lands, arresting and detaining Palestinians with no just cause, and leaving many die in Israeli jails. The blatant killing of innocent civilians, even children, without provocations. Israel's treatment of Palestinians in the occupied territory is similar, if not worse, than the treatment of blacks in apartheid South Africa. Unfortunately, we have endless military checkpoints restricting our movement, the constant presence of armed soldiers. Our economic rights are strangled. Gaza has been under siege for 13 years and is effectively turning into the biggest air prison on earth. And the list goes on and on. Israelis, and especially the settlers, treat Palestinians as less than human. There are separate roads and areas for Israelis to enjoy that Palestinians are not allowed even to access. And this will continue even now more in a more worse way. The latest plan to reduce Palestine to virtually nothing is the annexation plan, which is another 30% of which is losing another 30% of the Palestinian land. Unfortunately, this annexation plan, which explores the first step in the possibility of implementing the Trump's plan, has been strongly opposed by the international community. The Israeli government, on the other hand, has confirmed that they will proceed with this annexation, which constitutes a violation of the Geneva Convention and the international law. Allow me to share with you the impact of this criminal act on Palestine. I mean the annexation plan, the annexation of the Israeli settlements located in the West Bank and the Jordan Valley. First, Palestine will be reduced to a Bantustan made up of small pockets of land, virtually disconnected from each other. Annexing Jordan Valley by Israel will cut what is left of Palestine off from its border with Jordan, cutting us off from access to the world. The Jordan Valley is very much important for Palestinians because it constitutes the most productive land for Palestine. We will lose around 50% of our agricultural land. Our loss from the sale of produce will be around 60%. One of our most important stone quarries will be lost due to this annexation of the Jordan Valley. We will have no access to the Dead Sea for its salts and minerals. Being cut off from an international border strangles our ability to trade with the world. Palestinians, moreover, will lose 170 million cubic liters of water. That is the key of the life of Palestinians in this area and in the whole West Bank and the Palestinian state. Then comes the question of what happens to the 70,000 Palestinians living in the area. We know from experience that Palestinians will not be treated as equal citizens under the Israeli rule. Where will these Palestinian families go if they are expelled from their land, as it happened in the 1948 and the 1967? When this theft of Palestinian land would come to an end, nobody knows until the international community really acts opposing the Israeli procedures and practices. What is left of the West Bank still includes Israeli settlements that Israel, of course, will want to absorb. It is clear that Israel has no intention of allowing viable Palestinian state. As it stands, if Israel succeeds in this annexation, all hopes and realities of a two viable states, one Palestinian and one Israeli, will be lost. It's not only about geography, it's not about land, it's about the identity. So the annexation and the Trump's plan is not only a normal plan. For the Palestinian, it's an existential threat. It's the threat of our existence, of our identity as Palestinians and as Arabs, Muslims and Christians lives in this area. For 72 years, Israel's criminal behavior has gone unpunished by the international community. The United States' commitment to supporting Israel seems to be their shield, while the United Nations is rendered powerless, unfortunately. We need for the international community, both civil society and governments, to stand together and act without delay to stop Israel from causing another major humanitarian and political catastrophe in our lifetime. We need the kind of support with sanctions and boycotts that South Africa received against the apartheid regime. We must avoid together another racist regime from succeeding in their violent oppression against our nation. What is needed, or what is our demands from South Africa and from the international community? We demand, first of all, South Africa to support Palestine in making the needed lobbying and advocacy in the entire African continent as chairing the African Union now. We also always demand their support in the Security Council as they are members now, and they always have been vocal on this issue, and we really appreciate and thank them for unwavering support on the international platforms. We need South Africa to lead an international campaign to put sanctions on Israel, exactly as the international community were together in putting sanctions on apartheid South Africa a long time ago. We need the international community to hold Israel accountable for its deeds, for its crimes against people in Palestine. We want the international community to support the Palestinian resilience in their homelands by providing some kind of assistance, kind and financial assistance. As you might all aware, now the Palestinian government is facing a terrible financial crisis due to Israel freezing the taxes of the Palestinians, not allowing them from receiving their due money because of the security, because of the absolve of the Palestinian government from all the agreements with the Israelis, and most importantly, the security cooperation. This is the situation in Palestine. It's very critical, and we demand your support in this endeavor. Thank you all. Thank you, comrades.
Well, thank you, Your Excellency, our dear sister. I can assure you on behalf of the ANC that your struggle is our struggle, and having ourselves suffer a brutal and oppressive regime, I can tell you we feel your pain, we feel your anger, and we will support your determination and fighting spirit. Continue struggling, a luta continua, life or death. I can assure you victory is certain. And without any waste of time, as we come closer to one of our leader, our next speaker is no stranger. It's a simple, humble brother, father, uncle, leader, and veteran of our struggle, Comrade Ronnie Castrals, who served in exile as a member of Mkondo West Sizwe, who has been on the National Executive Committee, who has been a member of Cabinet of South Africa, a member of the South African Communist Party Central Committee, a veteran who's now at home, but very active And Comrade Ronnie has been very consistent, like his movement, like Oliver Tambo, like Luthuli, like Mandela, like many others of the ANC. Comrade Ronnie has been consistent in support of the Palestinian cause for freedom. And over the last few years have dedicated much of his time in the Palestinian solidarity movement, including a member of BDS and Comrade Ronnie Casserols. Over to you, our leader, our veteran, our father, our brother, our uncle.
Bonga Gokulu, Comrade Ace, and if I may, first of all, to salute everybody there who are with us. In the first place, the ambassador from Palestine in South Africa, and our dear brother in Ramallah, in Palestine, in the West Bank, Comrade Omar Barghouti. And then to salute the ANC, COSATU and the SACP, the Revolutionary Alliance, who have organized this very important meeting, bringing together the rest of us here from civil society in South Africa. It's a very important event, Comrade Ace. I'm honored to be part of it. I was asked the other evening on a webinar with British comrades why I single out, and that means why we single out Palestine in such a persistent manner, in such a focalized manner. And it was a very easy question to answer. A good comrade in London who had been with us through the anti-apartheid years. And I said, it's very simple, comrade, because when we South Africans visit Palestine, we see ourselves in Palestine. We relate so much to what our Palestinian sisters and brothers have been through, from the dispossession of their land in terms of colonial intrusion, and that's the Zionist enterprise, supported by colonial powers and empires, in the first place, Britain, and from United States imperialism, which is the case to this day. We see in their trials and tribulations, that dispossession. We didn't have the ethnic cleansing that they went through. There were the real aspects of untold violence against our people, the fascist style methods of suppression, fascist style by an Israeli state. And I don't hold back those words. We see that when we go to Palestine. Comrade Omar Barghouti has made reference to that in terms of our people who have visited there. It's a very easy question to answer. Let me now take up Comrade Phoebe Potgieter's challenge to me when I said, why are you putting me at the end of this wonderful meeting? It's actually always, Comrade, it's very nice to be at the end of a meeting because everybody else, and today's no exception, have said everything, as Comrade Bibi pointed out already 2 or 3 speakers back. But she said, no, Comrade Ronnie, you're going to be the sweeper. So, of course, those of us who love our football know that the sweeper, Comrade Ace, and you're a great football fanatic, I know that. The sweeper is the person who's got to manage when the adversaries break through and sweep up. But actually, there's been no weakness in our defense, in the advocacy by all those who are with us here today. And I'm so enjoying being with everybody. So thank you so much, as I've said, to our guests from Palestine, the Alliance and civil society. But I want to pick up on 3 points that my dear comrades in the ANC and COSATU have made. The first one from Comrade Obed, who made a very important point. He quoted the great Sol Plaatje, a great observer and advocate of African unity and freedom to our Palestinian sister and brother. He was alive a century ago. He saw the siege of Mafeking, a British stronghold, not far from where Comrade Ace lives, by the Boers. And Sol Plaatje, as Obed had said, speaking of the 1913 Land Act, which stripped and dispossessed the indigenous people of their right to land, said that we woke up the next day as pariahs in our own land. The Palestinians woke up in 1948, in the month that apartheid was elected to govern this country in May, middle May, in the same month, the middle of that month, Zionism made its illegal unilateral declaration of independence. It was totally illegal. The United Nations had, in their rambling way, they were dominated by the West, had decided on two homelands within the historic Palestine. The Palestinians, as a result of the well worked out plan of Zionism under Ben-Gurion, woke up and they were ethnically cleansed at the barrel of the gun of terrorists. And they were driven across to the borders or had to flee there for their lives with their children and their little possessions that they could carry. People who had lived there for centuries and centuries, who had tilled the land, made it the most fertile part of the Middle East, and they were stripped of their land and dispossessed. But unlike our people in this country, Comrade Ace and Comrade Obed, who of course woke up as pariahs, but as Sol Plaatje and you said, Comrade Obed, in our own land, woke up as pariahs in our land, the Palestinians, save for a small percentage, the 20% of the entity of Zionism called Israel, Comrade Bibi, you're correct, of Israel, who managed to hang on, the so-called 1948 Palestinians, 700 to 800 million were, in the words of Herzl, the founder of Zionism, who stated at the beginning of that last century, when we get our hands on Palestine, we will drive those penniless Palestinians. Some of them were actually quite wealthy and have made a good living out of the fertility of the land. We will drive them across the borders. So they didn't even have the right to be penniless in their own land. And ever since, we know what that ethnic cleansing has led to, in Ilan Pape's words, incremental genocide, because of the killings, the deliberate killings, the murder, the suffocation, the chokehold, to use a modern term from the United States, the chokehold, choking the Palestinian people's breath out of their bodies, because Zionism wants the whole of what was Palestine. They call it Greater Israel. They want it for themselves, and the Palestinians can go to hell. I want to come to Comrade Lindiwe Zulu, who was the one, I was so pleased, Comrade Lindiwe, when you mentioned the name of the great Oliver Tambo, because I want to remind us South Africans, and I want to tell Comrades Omar and the ambassador, that probably, in my view, the most outstanding proponent of justice for the Palestinian people was our late president, who preceded the great Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, because he led us in those almost 3 decades of exile, when the PLO, and I'm so pleased that Comrade Omar made reference to them in the 1960s, were with us in our armed struggle. I can tell you, and I haven't said this before, I met young Palestinians in Moscow when I was training there in the Soviet Union, and we met with Cubans and Yemenis and many from Muscat and Oman, as it was called, from Cuba, I've said, from all over Africa. And those Palestinians, I want to tell you, were amongst the naughtiest and most mischievous of us all. They had us always laughing. They didn't even take any alcohol while the rest of us did. that Oliver Tambo, throughout those decades, was the champion of Palestinian rights. Comrade Ace, I just want to record, and Comrade Lindiwe Zulu, that if you look at the history books, whose voice was it out of the global South, most prominently speaking and decrying the criminality of the Israeli death force when they descended into the Lebanon and they were behind the butchery at Shabra and Jatila? And Comrade O.R. compared the massacres there to the massacres that we of the ANC and of Mkonta, which is where our armed wing, were facing in Southern Africa. Comrade O.R. was the pioneer at the United Nations in getting those key resolutions adopted, including that apartheid was a crime against humanity, and subsequently that Israel represents that crime against humanity because it is an apartheid state. I want to just come to sweeping up in support of Comrade Bongani Masuka from COSATU, who has made reference to a campaign we got going some years back, about 10 years back, on End the Occupation. And I want to remind Comrade Bongani that I was present with him in London when he made a statement, and he was correct. I totally stood by him, in which he made reference to Israel as the apartheid state, as a neo-Nazi fascist state, and he was slammed by the Jewish Board of Deputies and the Zionist Federation, who are nothing but apologists of Zionist Israel and do not represent all the Jews of this country. You've heard from Comrade Judy Favish and the organization. And we stood by Comrade Masuka, who just recently, at last, the wheels of justice turned slowly, being cleared of that particular remark. But Comrade Ace, with the time running out, let me just take up the point about where we go to from now. I want to echo from our two Palestinian comrades, Comrade Omar, who fittingly opened this event, and the ambassador who has just preceded me. What they have called for, in no uncertain terms, is that it's enough to have paper resolutions and rhetoric. You know, the Palestinians probably have in their archives enough paper resolutions and declarations over these 70 plus years. If you put them all in the hold of a battleship, it's so weighty and such tonnage, it would sink that battleship. And whilst we don't decry the need for resolutions, for talk of the nature that we've had here today, this is solidarity in the verbal sense. But really, we know from our own struggle and history that we must learn to implement, and we've got to walk, not just walk, we've got to run, Comrade Ace, the talk. We've got to put the talk into action. And the pyromaniac who sits in the White House and the pyromaniac who sits in West Jerusalem, I call them pyromaniacs because in their absolute crazy, mad, fascist zeal to seize all the land of Palestine, they put a match to a powder keg that we see that demented dictators who undermine the resistance, the resolution, the samud of the people always do. And they ignite the powder keg like the police, the racist police, the pyromaniac in the White House have done in the United States of America, which is sweeping the world because the world, and particularly the youth, are sick and tired and revolted by the use of racism, which comes out of the colonial empire building and now imperialism, which says that the white race, the white man, is what counts, and Israel is part of that world, and all those like us here, Comrade Ace, who suffered in Africa, like the darker skinned peoples of Asia and Latin America, to them, we are nothing. The Palestinians are nothing, like the Nazis called the Jews nothing, and they think they can get away with their absolute murder. So here we are at the point of them exercising this land grab, the annexation. Look up annexation in any dictionary. It is illegal, it is a crime, it is unilateral, it is what Hitler did to the Czechoslovak Sudetenland when Britain and France and the West stood by and allowed it to happen. And today we cannot allow the European Union, Britain, its mainstay with the United States of America, to give the pyromaniac in West Jerusalem the green light to take on this remaining part of Palestine, 30% of the West Bank, which was only 22% the West Bank of historic Palestine. That historic Palestine must be part and parcel of all the people who live in that land. And we must give our support to the Palestinian resistance through BDS, through our call to the global South. Comrade Judy has mentioned it. I raise, Comrade Ace, here today, that the ANC, that COSATU must follow the example of the Communist Party, which has endorsed as an organization the Global South appeal to Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa as president of South Africa, who they see as needing to lead with the African Union, but with the whole of the Global South and Latin America and Asia. We involving and are involved with them. They are so inspired that South Africa is taking the lead because they see South Africa as having such a high stature. Now, Comrade Ace, we need the ANC endorsement and the COSATU endorsement, Comrade Masuka. We need that alliance to side with civil society in getting behind the Global South call, which is a very simple one spelled out by Comrade Omar, Comrade Judy, by the Palestinian ambassador, by Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu, to go to the United Nations, that Security Council. The General Assembly will be in support and demand that Israel be stopped in its bloody tracks. And if they don't, that this resolutions that we talk about, trade, arms embargo, must apply. Having said that, and now, Comrade Ace, I end on a historic eve, 25th of June, 65 years ago, on the eve of the 26th of June, when 3,000 South African compatriots of ours, of all backgrounds and colors, with the indigenous African people as ever as the main force of our revolution, but involved with the minority group, including some handful of whites, came to Kliptown tomorrow morning, 65 years ago, and adopted the Freedom Charter. For, on the one hand, Maine, South Africa belongs to all who live in it, and we fight for a unitary democratic country. But within those 10, 12 clauses was we stand for international peace, peace amongst nations, freedom and justice and equality for all people. And inherent in that was our solidarity with the people who had suffered from colonial oppression, exploitation, expropriation, dispossession of land and rights. The Palestinian people are the one people that are remaining, that are last in the queue. And if we can provide the weight of international solidarity and the bite of boycott, divestment, and sanctions that this colonial, racist, neo-fascist Israel deserves, to isolate it and to apply our fullest pressure of the global South, Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the rest of the world against countries like Britain and the United States, with a huge upsurge from the Black Lives Matter movement, which is going to add weight enormously to changing our world, and to come down on a remaining entity that is attempting to implement to the full a greater Zionist apartheid Israel. We've got to stop that. And I want to end by saying that the stand against the annexation is not the end of it. Because, Comrade Ace, in concluding, again, in thanking the ANC for inviting me here, for organizing this wonderful event, it's not the end. Struggle doesn't come to an end rapidly, quickly, overnight. It can grow apace, but there's a struggle ahead through this annexation. And South Africa, the ANC government, must be to the fore, holding the banner of freedom aloft. And we must not be put off by the pressures of business relations with the United States, with Europe, with Britain. We must stand by the principles which has made the ANC a great organization and the Revolutionary Alliance a great one. And we joined now, not by opponents of the principles that the ANC has stood for in our civil society, but those who want to assist in us moving forward and in providing what the Palestinian ambassador called on us to do, what Omar, Comrade Baguti, called on us to do. That is absolutely vital for us in this country. Siyabonga kakhulu, shukran, our love and solidarity to the people of Palestine. Siyabonga kakhulu.
Long live Comrade Ronnie, long live.
Thank you, Comrade Ronnie Fayari, as always, our veteran. And you did it with inspiration and also with clarity. Thanks for recalling our long history of solidarity with the Palestinians, some of the key principles of the struggle, the resolutions that we said they must now be run the talk, no longer just talk the talk, and as well as the challenges confronting us today, and how we can support as the Alliance and in South Africa. We will now then, as the moderators, be allowing for me to summarize, and then thereafter then hand over to the session on questions and answers. Thereafter, Comrade Peace Mabe will then be coming back. On the summary, what of the inputs on, obviously, annexation program that is unfolding in addition to the occupation of Palestinian land is coming very strongly throughout all of the speakers that spoke today, the panelists. And then also the support for the Palestinian question and the Palestinian struggle is coming very, very, very strongly as the panelists were talking. And also to then also use the ways of decolonizing of Palestinian land, and then the end of apartheid oppression in Palestine. Those words were used strongly as part of our support for the Palestinian struggle. The solidarity to be extended and then solidify by everybody, the trade union movements, the student movements, the youth, the religious bodies, political movements, academics, all of them be mobilized continuously. that we should continue the boycott of Israel products that emanate from the occupied territory, and also the issue of the criminal court, the International Criminal Court, be pursued, and then they also go for the resolution of the UN to have a special committee on Israel and for the free Palestine. And we also got from other speakers that said the truth in action towards justice, that what we see in Palestine is perpetuation of slavery. And the issue of the dual citizenship arising again, that we need also to look at it. To intensify the disinvest campaign, and then that racism across the global must be stopped. Also, the issue of racism be linked to poverty, and then that the academic boycott also be intensified, and as it has been ongoing before the COVID, and then we just have, under these conditions of COVID, continue to ensure. Ambassador Jara also came in around what this organization is going to do and the impacts it will have on the Palestinian people. It's not just around the illegal occupation, but also the denial of access to the sea and other things. And the organization not only as losing land, but also the Palestinian now losing their own identity. That we need to support the solidarity on boycott, sanctions, and disinvest. We need to support the Security Council, and thanking the UNRWA support that the ANC, South Africans, and then the Alliance have been doing, and ensuring that Palestine is free. And we want South Africa to continue to mobilize the international community to support the struggle of the release of the Palestinians, and that the Palestinians financially is now being squeezed by Israel by refusing or on an agenda of ensuring that whatever is due to Palestine is stifled and not access to the Palestinians. The veteran, obviously, as a sweeper, swept very well. And thank you very much, Comrade Ronnie, for that, and by recalling this long history. And also by quoting again Sol Plaatje in 1913 Land Act, when he said, awakening on Friday morning, June the 20th, 1913, the South African native found himself not as an actual slave, but a pariah or outcast in their land of his or her birth. Obviously, in the old quotation, it will say his, but we are now non-racial and non-sexist part. We are there, including the his and the her of birth. Question, and also reinstating the Israel apartheid state and the fascist states called Israel, and that calling for us that in solidarity in action, implementation, and running the hawk. And also that we
You are muted.
I got cut. I don't know what's happened. I'm back again, but I was already concluding, Comrade Secretary General, by concluding also with your remarks to say to the Ambassador of Palestine, as you did, Comrade Secretary General Ismail Hashula, the Palestinian struggle is our struggle. Thank you, Comrade Secretary General. I think the next set of issues is questions. I'm not sure it's Comrade Marvin now coming in for the question session.
Thank you very much, Comrade Obed, for the clear and progressive summary. Comrades, the floor will be open for questions and comments. We'll only allow for people to participate and rely on the team to provide us with a list of people who will be speaking. If you're not identified, please do not interrupt and try to be as short as possible. I'll hand over to the team to list the names of comrades that have been identified.
Comrade Peace, we have Comrade Vaila Motsumi, Comrade Tologelo Malachi, Comrade Reniva Fourie, and the Deputy Secretary General, Comrade Jesse Duarte, and Comrade Nomvula. So, Comrade Vaila.
Yes.
You've got all the names. We've got 6.
All the names. In that order, you each have 1 minute to speak. Thank you very much, Comrade Phoebe. Comrade Mutsumi. Comrade
Seems like the
Mutsumi.
system has frozen, Comrade Mabe and Comrade Phoebe. You can call.
Can you hear me? Am I
You can
audible,
continue to call the Deputy Secretary General to come.
It's Comrade, the next Comrade is Comrade Tologelo Malachi, is the second person.
No more hands, thank you.
Okay, unmute yourself, there he is.
Yeah, thank you very much, leadership. I think it's a progressive program that is convened on the day we are celebrating the Freedom Charter. Because we're given 1 minute, I will not go into many issues. The first issue that I want to start with is the issue of, as a sign of solidarity to the oppression of our people in Palestine and many other corners of the world, we need, as South Africans who have benefited from solidarity, from international solidarity, formulate a curriculum that educates young learners and students on the importance of solidarity against oppressive systems. And what do we have in common with the people of Palestine, the oppression that they are placed in now by Israel, is the oppression of mainly the focus point is occupation of land. And we know that the characteristics of that thing reflects us, because we are from an oppression where majority and most, if not all of us as Africans and indigenous people of South Africa, who have been oppressed by taking away the land, apart from the normal apartheid that was introduced in the 40s. But the land still belongs in the hands of the few who oppressive pre that. And that is what we have in common. The second issue that we need to speak on is that gone are those days where we sit every now and again to celebrate how we've been in solidarity with the Palestinians. We need to take action. And part of the things that we must take action with is that we must make sure that we ban everything that's from Israel, because the Israelians are the ones that are oppressing the Palestinians. Now, we can't say we're in solidarity when we continue to embrace the Israelians in South Africa. We buy their food, we eat their food, we support their economy to continue to oppress the Palestinians. Now, that is solidarity, that is posturing. Now, when we were expecting people to be in solidarity with South Africans against apartheid, we did not expect posturing. Now, it is time now we ourselves, we stop the elements of posturing and be very progressive and fight against any imperialist levels or any imperialist agendas, apart from whether it's Palestine or the USA, where blacks are killed and everywhere else. We must be in the forefront of fighting against that. And we must do that without fear or favor of anybody. But the moment we start posturing, I can assure you now, we will become sloganarians. We will speak slogans and speak every day about things that will never change anything anywhere else in the world. And the younger generation must further be given that responsibility to lead, because the old guard have played their part, and we must accept that they are tired. And as when they are tired, we must come in and they must support us with our wisdom. We must lead the revolution to liberate everyone all over the world as internationalists against the oppression of any apartheid, whether it's Israel or the USA or any person that takes the minerals or anything and putting slavery to our people without fear or favor. We must fight to totally liberate our people for economic freedom in their lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Comrade Malachi. Comrade Mutsumi? Comrade Fori?
Greetings from Damascus, Syria. Syria hosts a large Palestinian community, and also it serves as a site for many of the Palestinian resistance organizations. Syria is therefore a constant target of Zionist military aggression. In fact, military attacks in Syria have increased over the past few weeks. Palestinians in Syria are also suffering tremendously by the US.
Hello, thanks for helping. Stop being gross, please. It's not being gross.
Palestinians in Syria are also suffering tremendously by the US economic warfare on Syria, which has intensified since last Wednesday. So I want to propose that we should not just that we should also call for the end of Israeli aggression in Syria and the Middle East as a whole, but that we should also, in addition, call for the USA to exit the whole of West Asia. Then just with regards to the Chief Justice, I think it would be appropriate for this forum also to mention his words, given that he has the responsibility of oversight of justice in our country, and for him to condone actions that grossly violates international law is a reflection on his incompetence to exercise his responsibilities in South Africa. Accordingly, I think that maybe we should issue a statement that at the very least he withdraws his words or that he resigns from his position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Comrade Mokonyane.
Thank you very much, Comrade Peace Mabe, and thanks to the panelists and the moderators, the facilitators. I want to put 3 items just as the real actions that we must take out of this a very important activity in the calendar of the ANC and the Alliance's program of action under lockdown. One, I support fully a statement that must come from this meeting, supported by the Alliance leadership, calling on the Chief Justice to be measured in his views that seek to take us to our past, as well as him refusing being a denialist of what has happened to the people of Palestine, which can be compared to what has been happening in our country, and of importance that he occupies a very important position that cannot actually be found wanting, especially when it comes on a crime against humanity. I want us to propose that this is how we must put it, so that we remind everyone that what is happening in Palestine is actually a crime against humanity. The second one is that I want to propose that part of what we should be doing and learning from our own experiences, interacting with BDS and all our comrades across the world in solidarity with our people in Palestine, is that we should really call for unity of purpose amongst all the organizations in Palestine. Our own experience can tell, and what is of importance is that if we all together, particularly those that are of Palestinian origin, can have a shared vision, that would actually help to maximize even the support and strengthen the solidarity that comes in different forms and from different quotas. So the unity of the people of Palestine is also paramount. The third issue that I want to propose that we come up with, taking advantage, I've seen DSG, I've seen SG here, and some members of the NEC. We all are saying we need to reset the button in terms of the reconstruction of our country under COVID-19 and post the lockdown. My proposal is that as we reset the button, we must set it up that part of our national interests are the same as the national interests of the Palestinian people. And that therefore our demand for sovereignty is the same as we want for the people of Palestine. And therefore, in any of our international or global mobilization for the development of South Africa. Apartheid Israel is not one of those nations or countries or businesses from apartheid Israel will be the ones that we will not prioritize because we're looking at our own national interest, and in the spirit of international solidarity, we identify with the people of Palestine, and maybe Comrade SG and DSG will identify some of the areas of cooperation in terms of economic development with the people of Palestine. As we look at resetting the button for our own development, let this also be an opportunity to assist the development of Palestine. Thank you, Nyabo.
Thank you, Sis Nomvula. Comrade Jesse, you are the last speaker, and then I'll be handing over to Comrade Papela.
Thank you very much. Good evening, comrades. I was a bit late because we had no electricity and therefore no Wi-Fi. But the only comment I want to make has already been made with regard to our Chief Justice. The ANC has issued a statement today in which we are expressing deep concern with the remarks attributed to the Chief Justice in Jerusalem Times. When you assume a position like the Chief Justice has, even though we respect his right to individuality, nevertheless, he represents what stands in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. And what he has done is he makes it very hard for us to believe that he's going to be able to uphold the Bill of Rights in our Constitution, because he is deliberately supporting a very brutal regime, an apartheid regime, a killer and murderous regime that has not hesitated to kill people with impunity, to dispossess people of their land without any apology to anyone. And our Chief Justice seems to think that there's no problem with this. How are we going to respect him when we have to fight for the rights of land in our own country and a constitutional change that must happen to give it? He will be the one who has to oversee the Constitution once it is changed once again. I do believe that the Chief Justice has turned himself into a politician, and therefore he may not be able to continue to do what he's doing. And I'm not sure of what I'm about to say, but he may have gone against his oath of office. So we did issue a statement today, and we hope that the Chief Justice will retract the statement that he made. And for whatever reason he made it, we respect his right to be a Christian. We respect his right to be an individual, but he is the Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa. And therefore, those individual rights are somewhat limited, even for him. I'd also just like to say that I did hear the young comrade who says that the older people are old. I just want to say activism doesn't rot, neither does it get old. And certainly the activism in support for the people of Palestine will never get old or rot, only when Palestine is free from the river to the sea. I thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte, and then all those who had raised questions, Comrade Nomvula, Malachi, the Ambassador of South Africa in Palestine. To now, what we'll then be doing, I think what is emerging from most of the question is a statement by the Chief Justice of South Africa, that a strong statement for that matter, from the ANC and the alliance across ought to be made with all those motivations that have been given. We'll now give 3 of the panelists to then respond, but it's Her Excellency Hanan Jara, Comrade Bongani Masuku, and Comrade Ronnie Casseres to respond to questions in that order. Please, comrades, just respond to one issue that we think is very critical out of the many questions, and not for more than a minute. So if you could do so. Thank you very much. Let's start with the Ambassador, Her Excellency Jara.
Yes, good evening.
Yes, Ambassador.
Yes. Which question do you want me to answer? Is there any question?
You just choose any of the questions that came from the floor. Obviously, there's one from Comrade Nomvula, the NEC member, that the Palestinian must also help us by uniting on a shared vision for the future of Palestine. I think it was one that could be best answered by yourself.
Well, actually, I do not want, I really refrain usually from getting into such details, because myself, and I really, really would love South African people also to understand our point of view on this. First of all, usually when we talk about division between Fatah and Hamas, we do not talk about really divisions. After all, Fatah and Hamas are brothers and sisters. They are Palestinians and they are families. Maybe they have different views on different issues. Maybe the Israeli occupation is even making the division worse by feeding this division. But after all, I would love you to consider it as an internal division. I mean, even inside South Africa, there is a division between different political parties. I can see this division also inside the Israeli government. It's very harsh and it's even very difficult, but everyone all over the world laid it down just because not to highlight this issue. I find it very difficult for Palestinians that everyone from the international community, including people here in South Africa, I know that you had a different perspective on this issue and you are keen to see the Palestinians united. Of course, this is our ultimate goal. But after all, we do not want just to highlight this issue as a cornerstone or as the main issue just to give an excuse not to end the occupation. The main problem is the Israeli occupation. Even the division between Fatah and Hamas, the main problem is the Israeli occupation, who really played on these differences between the two parties. And actually what makes the division between the two even more crucial or critical is the Israeli measures by, for example, the geographical disconnectivity between Gaza and West Bank, the blockade that has been suffocating Gaza for 13 consecutive years now. So I do believe that, of course, there is a division and there is maybe different points of view in dealing with these issues, but I prefer nowadays to focus more on things that are crucial, to focus on the daily land grabbing by the Israelis, to focus on the annexation, to focus on ending the Israeli occupation, to focus on bringing an end to the apartheid state of Israel, and just try to play a positive role by bridging the gap between the two parties, as we always wanted to have. Usually the highlight is put on this from the international community, especially Western countries and the US, because they want to block any kind of mediation. We demand, South Africans, and we demand the people who stand in solidarity with Palestine to try to bridge the gap between the two parties and to bring them together again. I think, I believe this would be the best way to deal with the issue, rather than always to highlight the thing, because I'm sure that even inside South Africa, there is a kind of different opinions between the political parties.
Thank you, Ambassador. Because of time, and we just have to cut you there. Comrade Bongani Masuku, a minute, or not more than a minute, if you could.
No, thank you, Comrade Bapela. Just two things. The first one is a statement. I will indicate that my leaders have joined from CEC, who were busy in other things. But anyway, the statement is very crucial to contest ideas, to contextualize, because what the Chief Justice did has a risk of playing into very dangerous fundamentalist interpretations of beliefs or of religion. So it's good that the South African Council of Churches has been able to respond, and we must encourage that. But I think an alliance narrative or article, even if it's not necessarily in the form of only statement, it's good the ANC has released a statement, but it will be very good. But I also touch base with my own leaders about those possibilities. But let's contest those spaces, the ideas about interpreting correctly and in context what this means, because I find it very, very bizarre in the way the linkages were made. But anyway, I'm also, by the way, standing
Thank
in
you,
front
Comrade
of
Bongani. Okay, can we then go to Comrade, the last person, Comrade Ronnie Castros? Not more than a minute, so that we can hand over to the SG to close.
Thank you, my dear fellow activist. I totally agree with Comrade Nomvula and Comrade Jesse. That little dynamite package, Jesse Duarte, has been outstanding, and Nomvula, you too, in condemning Israeli oppression and actions against the Palestinians. I agree with them. Tomorrow, I think in the papers, you will see a statement from the South African BDS National Coalition condemning what the Chief Justice has got himself involved in with the Chief Rabbi of South Africa, who I've taken issue with lots of times. You know, this guy had said to me on one occasion that Israel is so generous because Abraham had said that wherever his footsteps land, that should be for Israel. And he said to me, his footsteps landed in the Maghreb, in Cairo, in Cyprus, in Iraq, Jordan, Syria. Comrade Reneva, listen to that. This is fundamentalism, fascism, which has to be rejected. And the Chief Rabbi, I agree with both of you, has to be questioned and sanctioned. I want to simply end by agreeing with Comrade Tobachelo. He says we must turn our commitment into real action. And I'm asking all of you, we've had from Comrade Jesse Duarte an endorsement of the Global South appeal. We've had from Comrade Blade Nzimande, leader of the South African Communist Party and the only serving minister who has committed to that global appeal, from Omar Barghouti and Palestinian civil society. We want all of you. We want the ANC to commit, start to commit. We want Nomvula. We want all of you to put your names down, because your names are very important, my dear comrades. Come on, Comrade Obed. And all of you must help us now, must help the Global South appeal, must help Comrade Omar in the appeal from Ramallah, that the Global South must express the commitment of all of us.
Okay.
And we ask you to help us in getting African states and personalities to sign this endorsement. I'm coming after all of you tomorrow, Comrade Obed. You're going to hear from me, Comrade Phoebe.
We'll definitely sign, yeah. We have made a call. Thank you.
Very much. Here we are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Comrade Secretary General is Mahashule. It's your platform now to close the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think, let me thank comrades, esteemed panelists, the Alliance leadership, our fellow moderators, and all participants. I've seen participants all over the country. I've seen a lot of you comrades. We have come to an end of a very robust discussion on the challenges facing the people of Palestine. And Comrade Ronnie and Comrade Auntie Bibi and Comrade Judy, in us you have wakened in us the spirit of Oliver Tambo, Sol Plaatje, Charlotte Maxeke, Winnie Mandela Rule First, and the spirit of no surrender, the spirit of no retreat. And many have been said, much have been said, comrades, of what needs to be done. And I think Comrade Obert has summarized almost everything. And like with all other sessions in this campaign, we are compiling recommendations so that we can take them forward in the structures of the ANC and alliance partners, as well as the leagues, for decision and action. The struggle of the Palestinian people for self-determination, for peace, for their dignity and freedom has been a long and ordered struggle. This latest indignity of the plans by Israel to annex the more Palestinian land in occupied West Bank is a grave injustice. And indeed, what the Deputy Minister Alvin Waters said yesterday, he called it an imminent catastrophe if allowed to proceed. So freedom and justice loving South Africans, DSG, I can assure you, and many South African Christians, Africans, and indeed the whole world will definitely take a stand against this blatant act of aggression by the Israeli government. This is the time to act as a united force for the dignity, freedom, human rights, and self-determination of the Palestinian people. The quicker the ANC implements its Nasrec resolution on the Palestine in terms of immediate and unconditional downgrading of the South African embassy in Israel to a liaison officer, the better. Comrade Ambassador, please assure the people and government of Palestine that the African National Congress, the alliance partners, the youth during this youth month, the workers, the people of South Africa, including Christians, are actually saying the struggle must continue. We are with you, side by side, we'll fight with you. Palestine, the land sweltering with the heat of oppression, the land sweltering with the heat of injustices, will and shall definitely be transformed into the oasis of freedom and justice. Let's request the Netanyahu to keep his Israel, request the Trump to keep his America, and allow the people of Palestine to keep Palestine. And as Comrade Mbongeni, one of our activists and artists, said in the 80s, freedom is coming tomorrow. The people of Palestine will be free. We will remain resolute and the struggle continue, Aluta continue. And thank you very much, Comrade Ronnie, and all of you, our ambassador there, Comrade Reneva. Thank you very much. Let the spirit of no surrender continue. Long live Amandla. Thank you, all the best.
Thank you. I think, Comrade Phoebe, the meeting is over. And I hand over to you if there's any announcements. Yeah, okay.
Comrades, there are no announcements, but as we continue with this campaign, we will also liaise with Comrade Judy Favish to distribute the letter so that other comrades can sign it tomorrow. Comrade Judy, I'll be in contact with you.
We will all sign. We will all
Comrade
sign.
Phoebe.
Okay, thank you, comrades, and have a good night and stay safe.
Hi, Comrade Mike.
I've seen you.